Madam Speaker, I ask to address the House for 1 minute for the purpose of inquiring about next week's schedule.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized.
I thank the Speaker, and I yield to the gentleman from New York for the purpose of announcing next week's schedule.
I thank the Speaker. I thank the gentleman from California for yielding such time. On Monday, the House will not be in session. On Tuesday, the House will meet at 12:30 p.m. for morning hour debate and 2 p.m. for legislative business, with votes postponed until 6:30 p.m. On Wednesday and Thursday, the House will meet at 10 a.m. for legislative business. On Friday, no votes are expected in the House. We will consider several bills under suspension of the rules. The complete list of suspension bills will be announced by the close of business today. In addition, we will consider Senate 1707, a bill to authorize appropriations for fiscal year 2010 through 2014 to promote and enhance strategic partnership with Pakistan and its people. The conference report on H.R. 3183, Energy and Water Development and Related Agencies Appropriations Act 2010, and additional motions to go to conference on appropriations bills.
I thank the gentleman reclaiming my time. According to the Politico, the Speaker announced at your caucus meeting on Wednesday that she intends to have the final version of the Democrat health care bill drafted by the end of next week. My question is, was the Speaker's statement accurate, and do we expect floor action on the health care bill in the House? And I yield to the gentleman.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. A bill will be brought to the floor when a bill is ready to be brought to the floor. So I would leave it at that. The bill will be brought to the floor when it's ready to be brought to the floor.
Well, is the Speaker correct that we think it's going to be brought to the floor ready by next week?
Well, if the bill is ready to be brought to the floor by next week, it could very well be that case. But the bill will be brought to the floor when the bill is ready to be brought to the floor.
Okay. Will the bill be drafted by next week so people on the other side could actually see
it? The bill, I thank the gentleman again, the bill will be brought to the floor when the bill is ready to be brought to the floor.
Well, I thank the gentleman for his answer.
You're welcome.
You know, earlier this week on Monday, our Republican whip, Eric Cantor, held a bipartisan town hall health care with Democrat Bobby Scott, both of Richmond, Virginia, showing bipartisan action. And following the town hall, the majority leader on your side told the media that he'd like to meet and discuss health care reform with us, and we have expressed our willingness to meet with him. But we have not been asked by the majority leader yet. Do you believe that we will be at any time soon, that our leader can continue to carry on that bipartisan conversation? And I yield to the gentleman.
I'd like to answer the gentleman's question, but Madam Speaker, if you could, just a little order, because I'm having some difficulty hearing all these words.
The gentleman is... The House is not in order. Gentleman will suspend. Members will move their conversations off the hall of the House. Members will sit down. The gentleman may resume.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman for his question. I think the gentleman, as I do, know that the majority leader is a man of his word, and if he gave his word to do that, I anticipate that he will follow through on that. And I anticipate, can't speak for him, but knowing if that's what he said, I'm sure that he will follow through on that request.
Well, you know, we look forward to that, and being one of the signatures that early on in this health care discussion, when the leadership on this side sent to the President saying we were willing and able and wanting to sit down to discuss health care, we're still waiting for the President to allow us to have that discussion in a bipartisan manner. And I do believe the work that our Republican whip, Eric Cantor, and Congressman Bobby Scott on your side of the aisle, that bipartisanship that they showed on there was very positive, and we look to your majority leader coming forward and following up on that discussion of having with
the gentleman yields.
Our leader.
I just say that I think we all welcome bipartisanship on this debate, and we hope at the end that this will be a bipartisan solution to what is a problem not only of Democrats and Republicans, but of all Americans. In fact, I think if we have more productive town halls like the one that took place around the country where the facts and the issues can be exposed and talked about and deciphered, I think we'll all be better off for that in this country.
Well, I thank the gentleman. I would like to know, from one standpoint, early on and within here, as we look across America and we look at the jobless and the idea that we want to create jobs here, with many on this side of the aisle worked very hard on a stimulus bill. that focused on small business, where 79% of all jobs are created, wanted to focus on job creation. We presented that to the President. Unfortunately, that did not get put into the stimulus. But the President didn't tell us that unemployment would not rise above 8.5% if the passed the Democrat stimulus. Since the signing of the stimulus bill, Americans have lost another 2.5 million jobs, and unemployment is now at 9.7, much higher than what the President said it would be. Will this House bring any legislation next week to help create jobs?
I thank the gentleman for yielding to me. I don't think there's any question that these have been very, very difficult months and, quite frankly, years that the American people have been suffering through. We have looked consistently at months prior to recent months of 700,000 jobs lost per month, and quite frankly, going back to the previous administration, under the Bush administration, where the height of that job loss was at its height. Happy to note that that job loss has been diminishing steadily over the past few months, and in fact we saw an additional 21,000 less jobs lost in this month than the prior month. Having said that, the road to recovery remains a long one, and we understand that, and that's why we took the steps that this administration took following up on the legislation passed in the prior Congress to help stimulate the growth of jobs in this country. And I believe, as many of my colleagues do, that increasingly there are signs that the economy is turning around. I know that Mr. Bernanke, the Federal Reserve Chairman, said, and I quote, "The recession is likely over at this point," end quote. I think those are very optimistic statements, and I appreciate the Chairman's response to a query. But I do think we still have a long way to go, and we will work to ensure that job loss is not only stemmed, but that we have actual job growth, and we anticipate when the Recovery Act is fully appreciated that we will begin to see job growth in this country.
Well, I reclaim my time. I appreciate the gentleman's willingness to work together, and knowing that the stimulus, the President said unemployment would not go above 8.5, and now it's 9.7, and sitting on financial services, listening to Mr. Bernanke saying that it will continue to rise. Would your side of the aisle be willing to work with us that we could reprogram the money in the stimulus to actually be job creation or help pay down this national debt so our country could actually be stronger? Do you see any future of that ability of making that happen? And I yield to the gentleman.
I thank the gentleman, and I'll just state for the record, the CBO, the CEA, and Moody's all estimate there are 1 million more jobs now than there would have been without the Recovery Act that we passed here in the House. The Congressional Budget Office said in the Budget and Economic Update that, and I quote, "Even though some elements of the CBO's forecast, particularly the unemployment rate, have clearly worsened, such revisions to the forecast reflect a much sharper deterioration in underlying labor market conditions than had been anticipated, rather than a smaller impact of the legislation." In addition, the CBO also said that and I quote, "The fiscal stimulus provided under the American Recovery and Investment Act will significantly boost economic activity above what is otherwise would have been." So I think, going back to what I said before, we're seeing a reversal in job loss. We're not at zero yet, but as I said before, 21,000 less jobs were lost in the prior month than they were to the month before that. I think that's showing that it is stemming, it is slowing down, and we anticipate if it continues in that way, which we all hope for and anticipate it will, we will begin to see job growth.
Well, reclaiming my time, you know, when the President first got elected, this side of the aisle invited him to our conference. And we sat and we had a discussion about which direction the stimulus bill should go. And we actually had a very honest debate. This side of the aisle wanted to focus on job creation. Our focus was about small business. That's where 79% of the jobs are created. And the President said, well, why don't you write out a bill and bring out some ideas? So a number of us worked together, a lot of hours, a lot of nights, crafting legislation. And we put this together, and we actually sat down and said, you can't just write legislation, but you need to score it. The idea for the American people to know what this would cost and how many jobs would it create. And as we put that scoring together, you know, it created twice as many jobs with half the amount of money of the stimulus bill. And we handed that to the President. Unfortunately, it did not get into the bill. And knowing what the President said, that it was more important on the time of when the stimulus bill passed and not what was in it, that he said if the bill was passed now, unemployment would not go above 8.5%. Well, I don't need a CBO study to understand that's not true. It's at now 9.7. And I think the American people want us to work together to create jobs, not to sit here and somehow celebrate the idea that only 21,000 jobs were lost. We need to be able to work together and celebrate 1 million new jobs created. We have legislation that allows it, focuses on small business, focuses on job creation, and I look forward that this Congress could come together. And I appreciate the opportunity and yield back my time.
Once again. I just want to respond, if I could, to the gentleman.
Gladly yield.
Thank you. I appreciate your words of desire for more bipartisanship. And I would just suggest that the Recovery Bill and Reinvestment Act that we passed reflected more bipartisanship in the legislation that was reflected by the vote that took place here on the floor. I think there were many attempts to include some of the ideas and thoughts from your side of the aisle that were included in that bill. I can talk about a number of them, but it was not reflected in the overall vote that took place. And I, too, hope that in the future we can have more of a reflective vote of bipartisanship on issues like that, as we had this week when both Democrats and Republicans both voted by a vote of 331 to 83 to extend unemployment for those Americans who are still out of work, who are looking and struggling to find employment. And I hope that the Senate will act to pass that bill and send the bill on to the President as soon as possible. And I appreciate the gentleman's yielding the time today for this discussion.
Well, I appreciate it. Reclaiming my time. The gentleman was correct. The bipartisan vote for the stimulus bill was a no vote. A number of people on the other side of the aisle also saw that that bill would not hold us to only 8.5% unemployment, that there was a better way, a better idea. And the one thing I would always ask the gentleman and those on the other side, bipartisanship means the power of the idea wins at the end of the day. So when a paper is presented that shows it creates twice as many jobs with half the cost, the pride and ownership should not be there, that we should allow the American people to actually win, that jobs being created is a much better place for America. And when that is presented again, which we will always gladly do to sit here and work with you, because we want to put people before politics, we want to create America that is strong, and we want to leave America not in debt. So as we move forward, I would always challenge everybody on this floor. The amount of the national debt that is accumulating in this administration is unheard of. And we have to make sure this generation that's going before us, that we leave in America better off than we were before. If the gentleman would like me to yield, I'd gladly.
I appreciate again his comments and his desire to work in a bipartisan way to help lift America out of the doldrums that it's in, lift America out of what has been called the Great Recession. I think it's also important to note that we didn't get here in the last 9 months. And we can decry the overspending by this administration all we want, but we also have to reflect upon the overspending of the prior 8 years, which I recognize the gentleman was not serving in the House of Representatives at the time, when the other side of the aisle increased the spending and increased the deficit beyond anyone's wildest dreams. So I appreciate your thoughts. I, too, want to help stop putting debt on the backs of my children and my grandchildren to come. I think we both share that. And we all need to work together in a bipartisan way to help this president. As he has said, his desire is to slash the national debt in half. And I think we're going to work together to make that happen. And with that, I yield back the balance of this.
Well, reclaim my time. If the president only slashes in half, it's still the highest deficit we've ever had. I'm one that likes to look forward. I may have only been here 3 years, but the one thing I have seen, if you take the entire history of the creation of this country, there's been 44 administrations. If you just take the first 43 from George Washington to George Bush and you add up all the amount of debt that was accumulating, and that's from the creation of this country to our battles with Britain, to World War I, to the Depression, to World War II, Katrina, Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, Korea, the creation of a highway system, it is equal to the amount of debt that is going to be doubled. That is something that cannot be maintained. That is something that cannot be happening. And the way you're getting out of that, you have to control your spending and you have to create jobs. That's why the power of the idea needs to win at the end of the day. So we will continue to come up with the ideas. We will continue to try to work in a bipartisan manner, and we will continue to handle them to you. But the only thing I ask of you is when you see something that will create twice as many jobs with half the cost, let's put people before politics, let's put America first, and let's move forward to the future.
And I yield back the balance. Was that from George Washington to the beginning of George Bush's term?
It's to the end of George Bush's term. It's towards the end of George Bush's term. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back his time.